Welcome to the next video in our auto layout section. In this lesson, we're going to get some more practice with setting up auto layout to move objects around the way we want them. So first I'm going to demonstrate how this app should operate when you've got it all fixed up. Your job is going to be to take the project that I'm going to give you, and it's going to have all of these same objects on it, but they're not going to behave the way they do in this little demonstration here. So also notice that I've got my mouse pose effects going again. So let's see. We'll make sure that those are running so that you can follow my mouse more easily. Okay, we turn those off temporarily. All right, so let's watch what happens here when I first, well, let's call your attention first to, I've got 5 objects in my app this time. I've got one that's supposed to be sort of in the top left corner, one in the top right corner, one in the bottom right corner, one in the bottom left corner, and then of course one right here in the center. And the most important thing is that when I go to the hardware menu and choose rotate right, and remember each time I click and you see that red dot appear, that means that I've left clicked my mouse, that when my phone rotates, everything stays positioned where it's supposed to be. Okay, I still have my top left in the top left, top right in the top right, etc. And my center object stays in the center. I'm now going to hardware rotate left. Now I want to demonstrate something. If you hardware rotate right, and then you hardware rotate right again, you'll see some odd effects. Here, all of a sudden, my objects are spun this way. And what we're essentially looking at, it's as if I rotated my phone twice and I'm looking at it upside down. And the easy solution is you just keep rotating it the same direction until it gets back oriented correctly again. So if you all of a sudden see all your objects apparently turned at a right angle like that, just keep rotating the same direction you started rotating and it will eventually get back to normal. Okay, so all you're going to try and do is make it so that when you run your app, you see all 5 objects positioned as I have them here, and when you rotate, they stay positioned in the same locations. There's also another little trick to this app, and that is that it's actually a sort of a game. There's a secret message. It's not much of a secret really, but it's just something added to make this a little bit more entertaining. If you click any of these buttons, some of them will disappear. Your job is to make a button reappear here in the center that says you win. And you have to click the right combination of buttons to make that happen. And of course, some buttons, if you click them, will make all the buttons disappear, and then you can't win the game, so you have no choice but to start over again. That's just a little bit of entertainment for you. I'm going to pause the video right now while I shrink the screen, and I'm going to show you what it looks like when you've actually managed to win the game. Okay, I've resumed my video again, and here notice it says, great job. So, you will have actually won the game when you can see great job. Okay, now I'm going to pause the video while I switch to Xcode and continue your instruction. Okay, so picking up again. By now, you should have been able to navigate to the website, find the to-do item for the FourCenter project. That's 4 objects in the corners and 1 in the center, thus the project's or app's name. Click the link to download the project, and hopefully you've saved it into a convenient location. I stored mine in my downloads folder. Then double-click the FourCenter.zip file, and you will see a project called, or a folder called FourCenter. You're going to double-click on that, and then find the FourCenter.xcode proj item. Double-click on that, and that will open Xcode for you with your project open. Now, when it opens, it may not look like this. If it doesn't, you're going to do the following. First, click on this folder, the Show Project Navigator icon here. Click on Main Storyboard, and at that point you should see a screen that looks something like this. Now we're going to want as much space to work with our storyboard as we can, so we don't actually need our utilities window over here, so we're going to click this to get rid of that. We also don't really need our Project Explorer right now. Whoops. So we're going to get rid of that as well. All right, now what are we doing with this project? Well, we're trying to make it so that each of these objects is located in the correct position and its constraints are properly laid out. A couple things that I would like to draw your attention to. First, up here, there are 3 warnings that are telling you that you've got something wrong with your project. You can also see that same warning that there's something wrong over here. And we're going to need to deal with those. But before we deal with those, let's start by just repositioning each of the objects in our project where they're supposed to be. So I'm going to start by moving my center object. Oh, you know what? Before we do that, let's run the app and see what it does. So switch it to an iPhone that's small enough to see. I like the iPhone 4S because you don't have to change the magnification. We're going to run this project and see what happens when we run it. Because even though the constraints are all messed up, we're going to see something. And watch what happens when I rotate. See, all of my objects stayed in various places, but they're just not where I want them. So I'm going to do rotate left. All right, so what we want to do is get each of these objects so they're in the general position where they should be. So I'm going to start by dragging my center object here until I see a blue line going through the center horizontally and vertically. Let go. Now notice that I have this orange line here, and what that's telling me, or what it's trying to tell me, is that I'm either missing a constraint or a constraint I already have is not a good constraint. When that happens, you have a couple of options. One of them is to simply start over. Make sure that your object is selected. That means that you can see these 8 handles, the little white squares around it. And then you're going to go over here to this button right here. I'm making it really big. And when you hover over that, it should pop up the little message, if we can get the tooltip. Resolve auto layout issues. If you click on that, you get a drop-down menu, and one of the options here is to clear constraints. Now notice that there's all views, which will get rid of all the constraints for everything, but in this case, maybe I just want to do this one object's constraints, so I'm going to click Clear Constraints. And upon doing that, I can go back up over here. And now I don't have that angry line anymore. The problem is, if I run my app now, I've placed this dead center. But is it showing up in the center? It isn't, and the reason is that I haven't put any constraints on it to tell it to actually go to the center. Again, if I sort of drag my iPhone here and put it right over my storyboard, do you notice how it is exactly right where I put it? It's in the center of my storyboard, but the shape of my storyboard doesn't match my iPhone. And if I were to switch to a different iPhone that was a different size, it would be in a different position. What we want to happen is we want it to always be in the center. So we do that by adding some constraints. And when I'm trying to align something side to side, that's called horizontal. That's called a horizontally centered constraint. So I check this box, horizontally in container. Well, what is this object's container? In this case, it's the storyboard itself. So it will center the object within the whole storyboard. And then I also, in this case, want it to be centered top to bottom. So that's vertically centered. So I'm going to click Add to Constraints. All right. Now I'm going to run it and test it and see if this object is now where it's supposed to be. And then I'm going to rotate, and ta-da, it stayed right there where it's supposed to be in the center. Okay, so I've got my first one taken care of. Now let's look at the next one. Well, top left here is doing a good job of sticking where it's supposed to be, but we don't want it there. So I'm going to drag it up to the top left-hand corner. Now notice I got two angry orangish, yellowish lines here. And what this is telling me is that and then this square rectangle down here with these dotted lines. What it's telling me is you told me that I should be constrained to this position, and you're out of position by 600 pixels this way, and it looks like about 400 or so pixels this way. Now, there's another new thing I want to show you. If you click, oops, let's not do that right now. If you click here, Show Document Outline, you will see a outline view of all the things that are in your project. Notice that there's all the buttons here, and then there's also a view here that has the constraints. But I also have this little tiny arrow here that's red. This red arrow is telling me that I've got some issue that I need to deal with. And if I click on that, now I get a list of each of the problems that I have to deal with. And it is currently divided into two sections. It says that I'm missing constraints for my top right button outlet, and my top left button outlet was expected to be at 520 as its X position, and 512 for my Y position, but it's actually at 2020. So, if I want to fix that problem, I can click this little yellow warning sign, and I have several options. If I do update frames, watch what happens. It moved my object back to where it thought it was supposed to be. But we actually want our object back in the top left. So let's drag it back up there, and then click that help again. So I don't want to update frame because that will move my object so that it matches the constraints that I currently have set for it. Well, how about the next option? Do I want to update my constraints so they match the current position of my object? Well, that seems like a good notion, so let's try that. Oh, and look at that. Now I have two happy blue lines around my top left object, but they may not be the exact lines that I was expecting, and we'll deal with that later, because notice that these lines are set to go to the right side here and down. So that may not do what I wanted. Let's test it. So I'm going to shrink it, and then I'm going to run it. And then let's see if, with these new constraints that the computer helped me put together, my top left isn't where I wanted it. It's nowhere to be seen. And even if I rotate it, I still can't see it. So the question is, what happened? Well, the computer tried to figure out what constraints it thought I wanted, but its guess as to what I wanted was not good. So what do? Well, we have two options. One option is to simply undo the last thing we did by going to the Edit menu and choosing Undo Update Constraints. And now I'm back to the problem I had before. So let's look. Are there any other? Well, there's another option. It says I can reset to suggested constraints. Let's try that and see what it does. Okay. Well, that seems to have fixed the problem again. Shall we see if it actually works when we run it? Well, it's in the top left. That's good. And if I rotate my phone, it stayed in the top left. So it seems that the suggested constraints in this case might have matched what I wanted. The other option for fixing it, if I didn't like that option, I could undo again. And I could always put the constraints in myself. So let's see how we would do that. Again, we would use the Resolve Constraints option down here. Oops. Let's see. Why isn't that coming up here? Let's make it so you can see it a little bit better. Oh, I'm going to click on my object here. There we go. And I'm going to clear constraints. Okay, so now I have no constraints for this object. Well, where do I want this object to stick? I want it to stick to the top of my area here in the storyboard, and I want it to stick to the left side of my storyboard. So when I'm trying to get it to stick somewhere, I want to use the pin option, and I'm going to pin it to the nearest neighbor above it and to the left. So I'm going to be adding two constraints. All right, and then I'm going to run it and see if it works. It is in the top left, and if I rotate, it's staying in the top left. So it looks like I fixed it again. All right, so two different ways to fix it. All right, your challenge for the rest of this project is to try to fix the rest of these constraints here so that they all work properly. All the buttons should be in their correct positions, even when I rotate the phone. Also, see if you can explain why is bottom left in my storyboard here, but down here it always seems to show up in the right position. That's interesting, isn't it? So, see if you could figure out what's going on there as well. I'll give you a little hint. If we click on it, look at what it's saying about this object. What is the computer trying to tell me here with these symbols? And is there something I could do, even though the app works, is there somewhere I could put this so that it better represents what it's supposed to look like? Okay, so once again, you're trying to get it so that your app looks and functions like the app that you saw at the beginning of this video. Good luck.